looking for specifically cases with kind of eerie details. And while this isn't the strangest missing persons case I've ever reported on, it definitely has some strange details and some things that make you go. Anyway, we are going to talk about 5-year-old Anna Waters tonight. So Anna Christian Waters was born in September on the 26th of 1967. Her parents were Michelle and George Waters. She had blonde hair and brown eyes and the cutest dimples when she smiled. At the time of this case, Anna was a kindergarten student. She attended Alvin Hatch Elementary School in Half Moon Bay, California. Anna was enrolled in the morning class, and she rode the school bus home each day around 1 p.m. She lived with her mother, her stepfather, whose name is Joe, and her half-brother in what was described as a remote farmhouse. This house was located about 7 miles south of Half Moon Bay, and the family kept horses, chickens, and roosters. It was said that Anna adored the farm animals, and she loved to help out in her family's flower garden. She was a happy, well-adjusted child who was well-liked at school, but was kind of shy and weary of strangers. So that is going to bring us to the afternoon of Tuesday, January 16th, 1973. When Anna got home from school that afternoon, she immediately changed out of her school clothes and asked her mother if she could play outside. It had been raining in Half Moon Bay and it had finally stopped, so while it was wet and kind of chilly, Anna didn't care. She wanted to go outside. Her mother had some friends over that afternoon, and so she told Anna that she could go outside as long as she put on her rain boots. Anna pulled them on over her blue jeans and happily bounded out the back door around 1:15 p.m. Michelle checked on her daughter periodically through the afternoon, well, really over the next hour, and she found Anna playing in the garden and in the backyard of their home. When Michelle checked on Anna at 2 p.m., she was on the back porch playing with some of the farm cats that they had. However, around 2:15, Michelle noticed that it had become very quiet and she could no longer hear Anna playing on the porch. So she stopped what she was doing, which I have no idea what she was doing, and went to look for Anna. The little girl was no longer on the back porch or anywhere Michelle could see in the yard. So Michelle starts looking for her. She spends the next 40-odd minutes searching the area with the help of the friends at the house and Anna's stepdad. But they could not find the 5-year-old girl. Shortly after 3 p.m., Michelle called the police and reported her daughter missing. In this case, the deputies with the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office moved quickly. They arrived at the home at 3:15 p.m. was a portion of their property, but Anna knew to stay away from it. However, due to the recent rains, the creek was higher than normal, and they worried that she may have slipped, gone into the water, and been unable to get back out. Because of this, their initial search was concentrated along the creek bank. The physical search for Anna was massive, especially in that first day, which we know sometimes parents have been told they must wait 24 hours. This team did not wait. Deputies from the Sheriff's Department and the state's Division of Forestry were joined by nearly 100 volunteers. They combed the area surrounding the family's home, looking for any signs of the little girl. They were worried for a little that she might attempt to hide from searchers, thinking she was in trouble. So they did something I've never heard of before. They set off like a loud siren. I think maybe like the tornado sirens that we do here in America, but I'm not sure. It might have been from one of the police cars. There weren't a lot of details about it, but they hoped that Anna would hear this siren and come out from wherever she was to return home to find out what exactly was going on. So, as I said, they were searching along the creek bank, and fears that Anna drowned were heightened after searchers found tiny boot prints along the edge of the bank. They initially believed that these boot prints belonged to Anna. However, it was later determined that they were far too small to have come from Anna and her oversized rain boots. They brought in tracker dogs, but he did not pick up Anna's scent near the creek or anywhere else. More than a mile of the creek bed was searched by deputies, but they found nothing to indicate that Anna had fallen into the water and been unable to get back out. They also combed through the property where Anna lived. There were 2 homes, 5 barns, and several chicken coops where Anna was known to spend time. But they found no trace of her. The search was temporarily suspended after midnight, but resumed again as soon as the sun came up. Anna had never been the type of child that would wander away from her house. She was always content to play in her own backyard. And as I said before, she had also learned from a very early age she wasn't allowed to go near the creek without an adult. And they said that she had always been careful to obey this rule. The weather grew increasingly stormy throughout the day on Thursday, forcing volunteers to abandon their search for the missing child. A spokesperson for the Sheriff's Department admitted things were not looking good, but they were holding out hope that Anna would be recovered alive. As the weather cleared, divers were sent back into the creek. They combed through a 3-mile section of the creek without finding anything. And at this point, they were confident that Anna was not in the water. The ground search for the missing child intensified after the water surge came up empty. Anna's parents, along with dozens of volunteers, scoured every inch of the area, just desperate to find some clue of little Anna's whereabouts. Most of the searchers were on foot, but some were on horseback, and a few brought tracking dogs to assist. A police helicopter repeatedly scanned the area from above, hoping to spot something that searchers had missed. Unfortunately, like the water search, both ground and aerial searches yielded no evidence. Due to their initial assumption that Anna had drowned, deputies had not interviewed any of her neighbors to ask them if they had seen anything unusual in the neighborhood on that Wednesday when she went missing. his car has never been located. As the investigation continued, some of the detectives started to believe that Anna's biological father may have played a role in her disappearance. You see, his circumstances were kind of strange. George Waters lived in San Francisco, and he'd not seen his daughter in several years. Now she's only 5, y'all, so he had no real relationship with Anna, but he did mail monthly child support payments to Michelle. When they notified George of Anna's disappearance, he really didn't seem that distraught over it, and in fact, never contacted Michelle for updates again. George Waters had long been involved with a man who went by the name of George Brody. I'm going to call him Brody from now on so that we don't confuse the two Georges. George met Brody in 1967, and I'm just going to say his relationship, because I don't know if it was like an intimate relationship or if it was like a friendship. Several of the articles said they couldn't confirm this, and I can't confirm it, so I don't really know. So his relationship with Brody started when he was still married to Michelle. Brody, however, wasn't actually his real name, and his actual identity remains unknown. According to family friends, Brody would manipulate George in different ways, and George kind of knew this, and despite all of this, refused to stop associating with Brody. In addition to having some sort of strange control over George, Brody also developed what was described as an obsession with little Anna. He believed her to be the reincarnation of a woman that he had lived with at one point. Somehow he even persuaded Michelle and George to change Anna's middle name by adding meaningless letters. They added E-I-F, like Frank, E-E, to her name, so that her name and his name would have an equal number of letters. Which is weird because, as far as I know, that's not his real name. So which name is he talking about? And how did you convince her parents to legally change her name to something that made no sense? We'll talk about it more in a little bit. So, biological dad George. His mental state grew increasingly unstable as he became more and more involved with this Brody guy. And Michelle eventually just made the decision to divorce him. After their divorce was final, he moved to San Francisco to live in a cheap motel with Brody. Despite the fact that he was a doctor and he definitely had enough money to afford someplace nicer, he paid for everything for him and Brody. And once he was completely under Brody's control, it was said that he did nothing without consulting him first. Not even to wear a specific shirt. He had to have Brody's approval first. Shortly after his divorce from Michelle, George was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Although he resisted all attempts at having himself hospitalized. He came from a prominent family. He had attended one of the best medical schools in the country. He blatantly refused to accept help from anyone. He worried that they would take away his license if they knew that he had been diagnosed with this. So, at this point, people are wondering if Brody's obsession with Anna had resulted in the two Georges kidnapping her. But there's no physical evidence to prove this. Anna's stepfather father, Joe Ford, was so convinced that George had something to do with Anna's disappearance, he often trailed George and Brody. He was just hoping that they may inadvertently reveal a clue as to the missing girl's whereabouts. He also took it upon himself to write George a letter where he directly accused himself of doing something to Anna, and George supposedly replied, "I'm glad that the tot is dead." Michelle, however, steadfastly believed that George had no involvement in her daughter's disappearance. She apparently said that he was too crazy to be able to pull off something like that without leaving some sort of evidence behind. With little evidence to go on, investigators eventually decided that Anna must have been abducted by a stranger. But the road that the family lived on was hardly a major road, and unless someone had a reason to be traveling on it, it was unlikely that they would have driven down it. It wasn't like a stranger had just stumbled upon her accidentally. So some people wondered if a childless couple had been stalking the family, just waiting for their chance to grab little Anna. The fact that Anna's half-brother had recalled seeing that couple trying to lure Anna into their car seemed to indicate that this could be a distinct possibility. For Anna's loved ones, this was kind of the best case scenario for them. It could mean that Anna was alive somewhere. Michelle, in fact, even contacted a psychic who seemed to back up this theory. She said that Anna had been stolen by a woman who had been unable to have her own child and who had desperately wanted one. The psychic claimed Anna was healthy and happy, just slightly confused about what had happened to her. Other people were unable to shake the thought that George and Brody had been somehow involved. George was much younger than Brody, so it was possible that they were the two men that had been seen by the witness shortly after Anna had gone missing. Although George had not seen his daughter in years, he knew where she lived and could have easily found the isolated farmhouse. If he told her that he was her father, he may have been able to get her into the car with him. When Brody died of cancer in December of 1981, George was deeply distraught by this, and to me it's weird because Brody's death certificate contained no date of birth and no social security number. There were no relatives that could be located for him, and after Brody died, George went about destroying any documents that were related to himself, Brody, or Anna, with the exception of some that were found in a safety deposit box. The man who called himself George Brody is still a mystery to this day. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks after George Brody's death, George Waters, Anna's biological father, drank poison in his hotel room. It's unclear exactly when he did this, because he was not found until nearly a week later. Police investigations conducted both before and after the deaths of the two men failed to turn up any evidence that they had been involved in Anna's disappearance. A private investigator hired by Anna's mom and stepfather was just as equally unsuccessful in this. Investigators have never been able to determine what happened to Anna on that day, nearly 50 years ago. Her case is still considered a missing person investigation, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has classified this case as a random stranger abduction. Anna Christian Waters was just 5 years old when she went missing in 1973. It's quite possible she's alive today and unaware of the fact that she was kidnapped as a child. She may even have vague memories of an early childhood spent on a farm. As I said before, she has blonde hair and brown eyes, a mole on her cheek, and dimples when she smiles. If you or anyone else you know have any information on the disappearance of Anna Waters, please contact the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office at 415-364-1811. You can also find this phone number in the description box down below. So let's talk about this case a little, because I know I said it had some eerie facts. I have to move, I'm so sorry. Oh gosh, okay. So, I think it is extremely strange that within a 15-minute window, this little girl went missing. There were people at this house. Michelle was definitely checking on her and listening for her, as a parent does. So to me, that means this little girl did not shriek, she did not scream, she did not cry. And that to me is so bizarre. So someone had to lure her into their car somehow. I don't think that I think it's a low probability that she fell into the creek and drowned and they never found her. I didn't find any, what's the word I'm looking for here? I don't know what word I'm looking for. Any records of how fast the creek was moving or how deep. They put divers in it to look for her, so it had to be deep enough for divers. It's not like what in my mind is like a creek, which is less than knee deep, you know? But the fact that they sent divers and did this 3-mile search, she would have come up somewhere, I believe, especially by now. So I just don't think that that's what happened. I do think it's weird that they found little boot prints, but they weren't her boot prints or shoe prints or whatever. That to me is weird. If they weren't hers, who were they? Whose were they? Especially, I couldn't find, were they on the property or just in that, 1-mile search that they did, so it could have been someone else's little kid's prints. That detail kind of mystified me quite a bit. So, but I think that had she fallen into the creek, there would have been, again, some sort of shriek or scream or something, at least as she tumbled or slipped or whatever. She may have gone under and not been able to come back up to get any more noise out. But again, I believe that they would have located her if that had been the case. So, if we're going to go with stranger abduction, if it were complete strangers, then I have to kind of lean towards sort of what the psychic said, in that maybe it was a family that couldn't have children and wanted a child of their own, because the alternative, which we've heard many, many times here on my channel, is that something terrible happened to this little girl, and the reason we haven't been able to find her is she's not alive to be found. I do think that 5 years old is young enough that you could kind of replace those memories with memories of your own. I know that I myself don't have a great ton of memories before I was 5 years old, just a handful, so maybe she is alive and well, told that she was adopted, or, things like that, and she has these fuzzy memories of potentially being raised on a farm or calling someone else mom, And that is sincerely my hope, is that she's just alive and well out there somewhere doing her thing. The whole George or Brody thing really, really confuses me. First of all, again, I couldn't find any information that they were in an intimate relationship. Some articles said they were not. Some articles said that they were. Some articles said they didn't know. Regardless, George basically left his family to be with Brody. And Brody had what people described as complete control over this man. He controlled everything. What George wore, he convinced George to do things. He was in charge. And to me, that's strange. Who was this man? And why was he living under an alias? And how did they meet? How did he... There's just not enough information out there for me. How did he convince George to basically let him control him? It is crazy to me how convincing people can be. This is actually one of the things that I've kind of discussed with my coworker, because we are following the Lori Vallow case, and I really want to know what Chad Daybell said to Lori to convince her of all of these things, and I'm going to cover that case at some point again. But how do you basically convince someone to leave their family, to live in this seedy, crappy motel, to pay for everything, and, what are you doing, I don't know, it seems really strange to me. This man with this name that wasn't his name. Now, I know back in the 70s, and I looked this up for sure, people didn't always have a social security number. They weren't issued at birth like they are now. So you actually had to get one. But to not even have a birth date on his certificate of death, that to me is extremely bizarre. Because they would have been asking George this information, and George didn't know his birthday of the man that he's living with. To me, that's so strange. Does he not have some kind of either false documents to have an ID or something? And why was he so obsessed with this 5-year-old girl? Because let me tell you what, that creeps me out. I don't know how old you are, but it said that he was much older than George. Obsession with a 5-year-old girl, there's something wrong with you. I do not care if you believe that she is your reincarnated soulmate, mother, child, dog. I don't care. It's weird, okay? And the fact that he somehow convinced George and Michelle to change her name completely knocks me off my rocker, because what? described kind of eerie in a way. So, let me know down below if you've heard of this case, because I had not before I stumbled across the Reddit page about this. Let me know what you think. Do you think George and Brody abducted her? Do you think little Anna fell in the creek and was unable to get out? Or do you think strangers abducted her and she is potentially living the life somewhere? Again, maybe she hasn't seen her missing persons photo. Maybe she doesn't know she's a missing person. Thank you guys so much for being here and supporting my channel. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I will see my patrons later on tonight for another true crime video. If you're interested, I did a video over there that I'm about to ask you guys about true crime cases that live rent-free in my head. There are so many cases that I just need to see solved, and I would love to know what yours are. I'll see you soon. Leave a comment down below. Goodbye.